As every year in the anime world, 2025 had the task to try and be a better year than the previous one was, or in this case 2024. And a lot of shows did not disappoint. A lot of anticipated shows had really high expectations, and even then they managed to overcome them. Anime such as the second season of Apothecary Diaries, the sixth season of Kingdom, and the last season of Boku no Hero Academia not only did not disappoint, but they were extremely praised, to the point that all of them are within the top 4 of this year. And although both Boku no Hero and Kingdom are currently airing, meaning that they can drop their ratings, that wouldn't take out of the fact that they were extremely well liked, at least when they started coming out. There were other newcomers that had really high expectations and they somehow managed to overcome them as well, such as the anime for Kaoru Hana wa Rin to Saku, and mainly the anime for one of the highest rated novels of all time, Lord of Mysteries. However, this video is about the biggest surprise of 2025. And granted, there is a bunch of solid possibilities for it. Ruri no Houseki, Medalist, and Takopi no Gensai are all animes that were not that highly anticipated, and they somehow managed to become some of the most representatives of this year. You can even argue that Uma Musume Cinderella Grey was the biggest surprise of 2025, given the fact of how popular the game became, and a good part of it is thanks to the fact that they happened to show a phenomenal adaptation to one of the stories specifically for anime. But none of them are my choice to the most surprising of 2025. That one has to go to To-Be Hero X. Out of all of the shows that I mentioned, To-Be Hero X is easily the one that came the most out of nowhere. Every other show at least had some type of source material or prior work that was a little bit known, but To-Be Hero X? No. The real name of the show is Tubian Jinshon Exu, something that makes the reference of one of the reasons as to why this was such a surprise. This is not a Japanese anime. This is a Chinese one. And although it is true that some Chinese animes have been growing recently in popularity, like Link Click or Tianguan Sifu, but having really well respected source material that are among the greatest manhwas and novels that ever came out from China, that is not the case from To-Be Hero X. So not only do we have an anime that came out from China, not only it has a not that well known source material on a novel or a manhwa, is that it doesn't have a novel nor a manhwa. The actual source material for To-Be Hero X is an anime called Tubian Jinshon Baba, or in other words, To-Be Hero, which is a comedy in which the first thing that we know is that the protagonist can know the hip size of a lady because he is a designer of toilets. I'm not joking. And then he goes down a drain and he becomes extremely ugly, but he gains superpowers. Like, what is this? I watched the first episode and the only thing that you can even remotely consider to be similar between both is the fact that the guy kinda technically turns into a superhero. Technically. After that really awkward start, we finally go to the other part that we're gonna talk about. To-Be Heroine? What? Yeah, there is not one source material, but this is actually by technicality the third season of an anime, and the first 2 seasons are a comedy, and they had absolutely nothing to do with To-Be Hero X, which makes this even more surprising. Why did they decide to get out of any source material this one, the opportunity to become the face of the origin of To-Be Hero X? I don't know. But we finally got into what we are actually looking at, which is Tubian Jinshon Exu. Hello there. To-Be Hero X is one of those weird cases in which you do not know how it becomes so popular. There's so many things against it. First, it's an anime from China. That doesn't mean anything too strong right now, thanks to the already mentioned both Link Click and Tianguan Sifu, also Lord of Mysteries, but it's still something that is not that common today. They're also from a really weird source material, but the other thing is that it's a 3D anime, which for anyone that knows a little bit about anime, you know damn well that 3D animes are usually not well respected at all. Like they are really questioned. And there's very few that had managed to surpass the stigma of being 3D. To Be Hero X is not fully 3D. It has parts of it being 3D, but that lasts for like 6 episodes or something like that. And it's really weird that it's only for the first 6 episodes, but you then realize why. And that's fine. And while you want more content like this for like really unexpected shows, like don't forget to really like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the channel a lot, and it would help you for make me make what you like. What did I say? I don't know, but let's keep moving. I'm not even gonna try to simulate the fact that I did not watch the first 2 seasons. I watched 1 episode for reasons, and that's it. Like, the first season was so putridly bad, like the comedy was awful, I'm not even gonna lie. It was 1 chapter, yeah, but I think that is more than enough when you see that the comedy is toilets. If you're making toilet jokes, you are 99% chance of being extremely unfunny. The other 1% is that you are Gintama. But we're not talking about Gintama here. To Be Hero X was a show that I had no reason for me to get engaged with. For context, I am currently doing something in which I want to watch basically a lot of top animes in order to make a video at some point about them. And you know, To Be Hero X is really highly rated, so I had to watch it. However, I had not expectations at all. I felt like it was gonna be like the stereotypical looks cool, it's cool, and that's it. And the previous show that I watched with that thematic was Solo Leveling, and I felt extremely disappointed at watching that it was genuinely just look cool, be cool, and nothing else. So I was expecting something really similar to Be Hero X. Even with the 3D, as I already established, being kinda suspicious, I was not expecting anything other than that. And honestly, I was pleasantly surprised to say that that was not the case at all. The story is very simple. You have a war in which you have the top 10 of heroes, and every single one of those top 10 wants to become the number 1. It has certain specific benefits, not only that, but they also are like well beloved by the people, and I'm gonna explain why that is important later on. But yeah, basically it's nothing too spectacular at first, nothing for you to say, oh wow, this is gonna be great. No, you would never believe that with just what I just said. That is, there's no way. However, it goes for a different method of saying the story. The show doesn't actually follow a single protagonist. It basically follows every single one of the top 10 heroes that are gonna be in an important event. It's basically a battle, which if I'm not mistaken is gonna be the start of the 2nd season once it came out. It's not a big deal to spoil, but I'm not gonna be too focused on that, just in case that, you know, that might be able to damage your perception prior, or, you know, be slightly spoilery, which I don't want. However, the important part is that we see a lot of important heroes. Not only the top 10, we see way more than that, but basically the top 10 is the focus. However, in the first episode you do not know that, and I didn't knew that, and I was not expecting anything big. Like, the first thing that we see is kinda interesting, kinda slightly surprising, but nothing spectacular. And that is mainly what the first episode is all about, until the last scene of it all, which was really surprising, to be honest. However, I'm not gonna focus in that scene, but I'm gonna talk about the first protagonist, which is a great showcase of what are things to come. The first protagonist is a random dude, literally. that somehow gets involved with another hero and now he has to impersonate it. And that makes it so we start understanding the basics of the war. This random dude, how can he impersonate a superhero? Well, the reason behind it is the fact that the heroes are made based on the trust that the people has on them. So for example, if you're a YouTuber and you record yourself helping others, a lot of people is gonna respect you and that is gonna be making you more powerful. Not only that, not only is gonna make you more powerful, but the second part is also important. That is gonna be your power. If in this example that I mentioned, you help a lot of poor people, you are probably gonna be able to generate money, generate food, something that will be directly related with helping others, which is very, very unique, a very cool concept as a whole. Having a power based on what the people believes you are, fantastic. And granted, in the first guy, that is not that interesting. Because the first guy is basically an introduction. The first hero is basically just your stereotypical Superman. It can fly, has super strength, it can do some other stuff, but nothing else. He is not interesting, at least in terms of powers. The guy behind it's interesting because he's not the real hero, but other than that, it's not that big of a deal. The things start getting way more interesting after the first protagonist. You see, almost every chapter has something really interesting behind, something that makes you be surprised. Maybe that the following protagonist is way more interesting than what you expected prior to getting into the show. Maybe it's the story behind, or maybe it's the personality of the people surrounding it, or maybe it's the story inside the story of the character, or maybe their backstory. A lot of things are actually surprisingly good with that. You have characters that are extremely powerful thanks to one singular act that they did, like Standman or Firman, that basically just prevented a girl to be crushed by debris, and he basically got his power of basically being unmovable, like being a firm guy. Yeah, the names are not that unique for the most part, but that is also part of the deceiving part of the show, of making you believe that it's a very generic story when it's not. The other important part is how these specific powers will always have certain type of downside inherent within the character itself. That is not something really common for this type of powers. Usually the weakness in most shows is just the fact that, for example, if you use fire, you are weak to water, natural things. But no, here the powers are inherently flawed thanks to the perception of people. There is one guy that, for example, is an extremely efficient assassin that is considered to be a quiet guy, and because of the perception of the world of him being an extremely quiet guy, he cannot physically talk. He cannot. Which is an insane thing to consider, how the perception of people can actually damage you in real life, making you unable to communicate with others. Not because you don't want to, but literally because you cannot. And that happens to almost every character, except what I assume that is actually the main protagonist of the show, but we're not gonna talk about him just yet. Every single character also has a very interesting story to tell. The first one was basically nobody, but his entire story was based on the fact that he wanted to become a hero and wanted to prove that even a Mr. Nobody can become the hero of the people, which is how it works in this world. And how I wish it worked in real life, but you know, there's a lot of people that get popularity because of other things. But let's not talk about the electrified dogs again. This show also does a phenomenal job at showing every single character's motivation. All of them are heroes for one reason or another, but not all of them are just because of the popularity or because they extremely want to be heroes. They might just want to be the hero of someone. They might just want to be heroes, period. They might just want to be the concept of a hero. They might just want to help others. They might just want to help a single person. They might just like the fame, and every single one of those is a valid reason for them, because that doesn't matter for the war. The war just cares about you doing heroic stuff. Another important thing is how actually good the time management for every character is. You see, this is a show that has a total of only 24 episodes, which is a very small amount of time when you consider that there is 10 main protagonists, at least in theory. But the fact that they are around each other helps a lot. You can see the first 5 or 6 episodes of just Ling Ling, while you will have for the next story a couple of other protagonists at the same time, which is gonna merge perfectly because their stories are actually connected, which is a very pleasant surprise how good the connection of the stories are within each other. Not all of them are directly connected, but most of them are. As far as I can count, there's like 6 characters that connect with each other in one way or another, and there's also another pair that connect with each other as well in a certain way. Not exactly, but kinda. So it makes it really, really cool. You also need to take into consideration that all of this time management is done while you also have a story behind the scenes. Not all of this is just the heroes. There's also a group of people behind them, people that tries to maintain the power of the heroes because of certain lore reasons. And that is really cool. They don't just let the heroes go left and right doing whatever they want. No, there's actual reasons for them to keep them on check. There's reasons for them to not allow them to become too powerful, or else that would be disastrous. And they actually show the lore, and they actually show the reason as to why they are doing it, with every single headmaster. I don't know if that's the name that I should use, but I don't care about logistics. So yeah, the headmasters of every main association of heroes, all of them are alongside each other in the fact that they need to stop the actual powerful heroes to becoming even more powerful. Because as I'm saying, when everyone trusts them, they become more and more powerful. And what would happen if every single person in the world trusts you with all of their might? You become a god. Literally. There is a lot of ways to show on this concept, and they use them perfectly. The way that there was a former god in the past. The fact that there are people that wants to revive those gods. The fact that there is a countermeasure to those things of pure respect, which is fear, which is something that is not fully touched in the first season, but I'm pretty certain that they're gonna talk about in the second. Every single part of the story feels well connected. Every single character feels that they are fulfilling an actual role. Something really strange for a show that is so short. 24 episodes is less than half a year of continuity with just a single episode a week. And this is not an anime that has a longer duration than the average. It only has a standard 24 minutes per episode. So it's really surprising that they managed to do it. And they show, as I'm saying, everything. Every single character has their own thing to fulfill behind the doors. To the point that you even start questioning if the story is about heroes halfway through the story. It is that deep with all of these characters trying to make their own things better than the others, and how it's very obvious that everyone involved kinda wants to become, to a certain extent, the actual gods by managing all of the top heroes. It's obvious that they cannot do it, but it's obvious how they want to do it, and that is phenomenal. But as always, the soul of a story is the characters, and oh my god, all of them are good. I already talked about Ling Ling, but every single protagonist is fantastic. Lucky Shang has a really sad yet full of hope story behind her power of being extremely lucky. The new Isol is the story of how a person wanting to impersonate other just to become the hero of someone else can become as helpful as the original hero. Little Johnny has to constantly struggle with the fact that he is an orphan and all of the consequences related with that. Ghostblade has an insane way to represent an antisocial or asocial or someone that is just straight up autistic to a certain extent. Not even joking, like that is literally what he is. Probably also like kinda psychopathic. Not in the sense of, oh, he kills people, but rather in the sense of literally unable to feel emotions to a certain extent. I don't know how much of that is just based on his story, of the fact that the people see him in that way. I don't know how much of it is just that he started being like that and then that extended, but that's what he is. And there's even the dog, which, I mean, there's a dog. Like, there's a dog that is a superhero. He uses a hat. What else do you want? There's also the story of Lolly. Yeah, she's called Lolly. And she's not a lolly though. She's actually a 16-year-old. Wait, hold on. I know what you're gonna. I know what you're thinking. I'm not saying anything about that. I actually don't know if she's 16. She might be 18. Wait. Police, I'm not saying that. I'm not certain to just confuse you. Wait. Hear me out. No, not that. Hear me out. Yeah, Lolly, now going back to the real deal, Lolly is actually also an interesting character with all of the thing of you being as powerful as people see you. And because Lolly is so cute, quite literally in story, she's really cute, nobody can see her as a powerful hero. Which is the reason to why she has to turn into a powerful hero by using her mind, which is very cool. And yeah, that also makes it a really unique way to get into this backstory of a superhero. Just like a couple of the others. Not all of them are really unique, in the same way that not all of the powers are extremely unique. A couple of these are really generic, but some of them are extremely original. Mainly the one of X, which I absolutely adore that guy. I'm not gonna talk about him because he just appears in the last like 6 episodes of the show. So I feel like anything talking about him would be like too much of a spoiler. But yeah, let's just say that X is one of the coolest, truly coolest characters out there. Not needing to out-farm like others, but actually being cool by the sheer nature of him doing something interesting. And that interesting stuff turning him into a cool person or character. You know, they're not real, sadly. So yeah, this show actually manages to do so many things right that I was not expecting. A show that was seen for me starting just as a potentially, generic battle shonen actually turned into a really deep story of superheroes, of the superpowers, not only about them, but also about the people behind them, and what all of that means, not only for them, but also for the entirety of the world. How a single character turning into something really dangerous can turn everyone into a problem and can make everyone fear him. And how one single decision can actually mean something really big for the entirety of the story. Like we see in the story of New Isol, which I'm not gonna say anything about that, just gonna say that there's something really big happening there. But yeah, everything is really well thought out. The connections of characters, the storytelling, the war is really interesting as well. Something basic. I'm not gonna say that it's like a Hunter x Hunter, a One Piece, but for the standards of something that is just 24 episodes long, it actually feels really deep, and I adore it because of it. I honestly, as I said, had no expectations coming to this show, and somehow managed to become the biggest surprise of 2025, at least in my opinion. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you all enjoyed it. If you want more content like this, as I already established, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want any video in particular, any show in particular, or if you want even me doing content about a specific character, comment down below so I can know what are you talking about. So yeah, without anything else to explain, see you next time. Bye bye.